Hello and welcome to The Found Cause, where we found our cause and serve the Lord Jesus Christ. I am Michael, the man behind the machine, and to my virtual front is...
Sebastian, the bookkeeper.
Sebastian, I heard you have some interesting knowledge to share with me.
I do. I've been reading a lot.
As you do, you are the man behind the book. Always sending me articles. Always sending me articles. Big, fat, long articles.
Yeah, for all the viewers, he probably hates me by the amount of stuff that I
Oh, I don't hate you because I don't actually read them. If it's a video, I can watch 2 times speed, probably.
Well. So I did the reading for you because, something came to my mind before. Is there more to it, to the story, other than the books of the Bible? Is there more information that could be found?
Like Book of Enoch style stuff?
Yes. And actually, I found a lot of Gospels because, as we all know, Dan Brown was saying that there were many books that didn't make the cut to the Gospels at the Council of Nicaea. They just didn't make it in the Bible.
Yeah, there's only 4 Gospels, and there's more. Yeah, but I mean, who believes Dan Brown? There's only a couple legitimate scholars out there that can really tell you what's true and what's not, right? What Gospels do you find?
Like the Gospel of Thomas, the Secret Book of John, the Gnostic Apocalypse of Peter.
Well, hold on. Okay, so these sound pretty fishy. Did you square these away with? I've got a pretty authoritative source if you want to check to see if things are real. Go to your TV guide and check out History Channel. See if they've got. They run a lot of Bible stuff. Check to see if they have episodes on those books. Have you?
I have, and they're there.
Oh, well, they're all good. Legit should be out of the Bible. Whoopsie, sorry. Cut! It's a juke, it's a fake. Who could have guessed it? It's one of our bits. A really good bit. Just kidding. This episode is on Gnosticism, specifically the dangers that Gnosticism imposes today. We're going to talk all about Gnosticism, all about the weird, different gospels that you may have heard of from Dan Brown and Da Vinci Code and a lot of other things. But first and foremost, just in case anybody's not aware, it's all a joke. Okay, I know the History Channel is only authoritative on things relating to Pawn Stars and other reality TV shows, and not authoritative on anything it has to say with the Bible. In fact, if it says something about the Bible, it's probably wrong. So these extra gospels are, of course, utter junk. Some of them a little less junk than others, but we're going to examine some of those today. But specifically, today's topic is a passion project, as they usually are, of Sebastian, who has been dutifully scouring all different sorts of first-party sources and reading the material and sending to me, Lord help me, all the different Gospels of Thomas and Secret Revelations of John and a bunch of New Age Gnostic sources on the internet. So first things first, Sebastian, I want you, since you've been doing all the research, to explain to the viewers exactly what Gnosticism is and why we should care about it.
Yes, great question, Michael. Why should we care about it? Let's start why it is important. Gnosticism, for all those that like church history like myself, and you, Michael, as well, Gnosticism was the biggest enemy to the early church. It was, they were huge in numbers. There were many groups competing for followers, and they really trying to stamp out the early Christian church in its infancy. So for let's say 200, maybe even 300 years of church history, they were battling with Christianity. And notice I say Christianity, because you were going to find some Gnostics that claim to be Christian, and I've run into some of their statements as well, that they try to merge in Christian beliefs into Gnostic, or vice versa. That's why I say it's important. It was a significant moment in church history. And by now, they're almost all gone. But there's still some are still around. As you alluded to, Michael, all these books are fictitious. They were written by many scholars. They are dated to be around the year 400. The earliest one's the Gospel of Thomas, which is the earliest being the year 200, maybe 150. But they're from somewhere called the Nag Hammadi Library. You can look it up. As a brief summary, it has all the Gnostic books that you could cherish for. Just kidding. They're not cherished. You can't cherish them. My brain was fried after trying to read through all of this stuff. And this is something that shouldn't treated lightly because Gnosticism, while they allude that they are like happy and merry and we can, coexist with Christianity, as some modern groups might say, it is actually completely opposed to the message of Scripture,
Yeah,
the Old and New Testament.
And I think when I think Gnostics, so before we did any of this research, and I should say you did most of this research, the only thing that I really knew about the Gnostics was that they were this ancient foe to Christianity, which, I mean, they're dead and gone, so who really cares? And like you said, there are apparently some fringe groups that still follow quote-unquote Gnosticism, whatever. I mean, it's like, some grandma and grandpa in the middle of Iraq. It's not a big deal, and that's not why we're doing the episode, is not to talk about these fringe groups, though I guess you can, and there's some merit to this episode just being about examining another religion and how to take it apart should you ever encounter it. So there's value in that. But the main reason why Sebastian sold me on even doing this is that Gnosticism is, as you'll hear, really a designer religion designed by the enemy, designed by Satan, designed by demons. And I say that in contrast to things like Hinduism or Greek mythology or Roman mythology. Like, all the mythologies are kind of just a distraction, a bunch of random lies, probably from the enemy and from people. But Gnosticism is a lot like modern New Age in certain ways, in that it's designed basically from the demons down. So people achieve quote unquote knowledge from meditation, which is straight from demons, and you'll see the way it's constructed. It's directly made to combat Christianity, and it was made immediately by the enemy as soon as Christianity started, right? So there's even evidences in the Gospels that Paul and John, especially, were in the later part of the New Testament writings, that they both are starting to encounter Gnostic-style debate tactics against Christianity, and they want to cut it off at its head. And then it continued to grow. Those debate tactics that Gnostics believe continued to grow, and eventually got cut off because they're junk. But it's a dangerous enemy, and one that likes to repeat itself in different themes, even to this day. So even if Gnosticism itself is dead, I want to talk about it so that we see the themes that the enemy likes to use to deceive people, not only in false religions today, like New Age and other things like that, but also in the church. How the enemy likes to construct false narratives that directly attack God, and the enemy likes to reuse the same types of attacks. So anyways, that's the reason that I think we're really approaching this today. And so if we get far along and Sebastian's going on and on about how Gnosticism is and all its details, know that a lot of those details are repeated today, and that's why it's important.
Yeah, so you're welcome, Michael, to take the helm into a more applicable, because I want to share all that I've read so that you don't have to read it yourself.
Oh yes, and that is a grand service. I'll let you. So I'll let you go on your rampage. So again, Gnosticism, early, some say pre-Christian, so it was actually like a mystic movement that latched on to Judaism and Zoroastrianism, and then Christianity was the next big thing, so it just latched onto that and tried to explain its way into that. And so that's probably its origin. They started writing these books, like Sebastian was saying, earliest of them might have been appearing about 150, 200 AD, and the later ones start trickling in way afterwards. But the movement itself is something that we can analyze and describe now, not only looking back on the amalgamation of books that supposedly make up the Gnostic movement, but also what modern Gnostics say today. So Sebastian, do you want to go over the general narrative that we can juice from all of these things first, and what the universe is and who God is and how we get saved?
Yes. So we're going to start seeing, if you go back to our New Age episode, you're going to see a lot of similarities. So in the beginning, there was one deity. This deity has many names depending on which Gnostic you ask. And it's known as the Monad. It could also be known as the Lord of Light. And this being, he is unknown. He is unknowable by any human because he's just so grand, so far out there. He is more than perfection. This is just quoting the Gnostics. And from this divine being, at some point, there were other beings that started emanating from it. That's the term used, emanation. I was describing it to Michael more like a starfish. How from the limb, there's another starfish that grows, and then from that limb of the new starfish, then there's another starfish that grows. So it's kind of like broken telephone a little bit, because the farther away you get from the original monad, the more unimpressive that the beings are. So there were many eons. That's the emanations. These are beings like truth, wisdom, love, death, all these things are emanations from the original unknowable deity. This is the deity that the Gnostics worship. So the Gnostics then start explaining in different books that Sophia, wisdom, one of the lesser eons, decided to, on her own account, have an offspring. And this offspring is called Yaldabaoth. Remember that name, because it's based on one of the one of the protagonists actually in the Bible. So
one of them, yeah. Starts with a Y.
Yes, and ends in yeah. So yeah, for this Yaldabaoth, she was dissatisfied with what she created. They are implying that this is just some ugly, stupid baby that she made, and then the eons were displeased, so they cast him out, and he was removed from this higher dimension of existence known as the Pleroma. So now, this Yaldabaoth, he's not happy. He is in denial that there are other beings superior to him. So the Gnostics describe this Yaldabaoth as being arrogant, selfish, and also stupid. He decides to use the powers that he steals from Sophia, his mother, and reshape the physical world, such as planet Earth. He also makes other planets and other celestial bodies as well. These celestial bodies are known as archons. Yaldabaoth is the main archon.
Mm-hmm. Like units in StarCraft.
Yeah. And they are the bad people. Archons are bad, eons are good.
They're a very good unit in StarCraft.
They may be good troops in StarCraft, but they're definitely not good according to the Gnostics. So,
or they're not good right now. But the viewers don't know is that you just like hunkered down because there's a tornado warning going on, and you'll explain. But the Archons bring weather, so I guess they're coming down.
Right. They do control all calamities on Earth. So, yeah, like all the celestial bodies, they send the calamities down. But for Yaldabaoth, he decides to create minions, and after creating Earth, being jealous and wishing beings to serve him, he steals souls created by the monad and entraps them in human bodies, and that's how Adam and Eve are made. Pretty similar to the Genesis story, right?
Basically, there's just a bunch more gods, and Yahweh's evil, and then human souls aren't from Yahweh. Besides all that.
Wait, did you say Yahweh?
Am I spoiling it?
You did spoil it, but yes, Yaldabaoth is Yahweh. The Gnostics say that the God in the Old Testament is despicable, wicked, selfish, and evil. So, Yahweh, that's who they attribute is Yaldabaoth. Both start with Y. And part of it, going off a little bit on this, a famous quote from the Secret Book of John is that, quoting from Isaiah, "I am God and there's no other God besides me." That is the pinnacle, according to Gnostics, of the rebellion of Yaldabaoth, not recognizing that he's actually just one amongst even greater gods. So they call him stupid, they say he is a blind god, they just throw insults all around in their secret books. So humans are made. And now Sophia has a plan. Let's actually rescue these people. So she sneaks past Yaldabaoth because, as we all know, he's just dumb and stupid. Mm-hmm. So we can just sneak past him to not even thwart his plans, but just to troll him. She sends a serpent, now starting to sound familiar, and tells the humans, informs them that if they eat the fruit of the tree, then they will have knowledge of the greater gods and the Pleroma and all the infinity above Yaldabaoth, and they will be free. So Adam eats the fruit, and then Eve, and then
Does
they go
Adam eat it
where
first in the narrative? They just both eat it.
they both. I would just say they both eat it.
Okay.
And then, according to this narrative, humans are now superior to Yahweh because we are now aware of the existence of other gods, whereas they say Yahweh is in denial and he's just a fool and a clown. So we are above him. After that, Yaldabaoth gets angry, casts them out of the garden. On the side, Adam has intercourse with one of the eons, and then that gives birth to Seth, which is, just out of the blue that comes up. So Gnostics really revere Seth. And you mentioned too, Michael, that for whatever reason, in any epic movie or series or anime or whatever, they have some obsession with Seth.
Well, specifically Japanese, anime. Street Fighter has a character named Seth who's like this gender ambiguous god thing, and it's all from Gnosticism. Because Seth also, Gnosticism is this gender ambiguous guy, whereas we know the real historical biblical Seth is the third son of Adam and Eve, and he's the one that that's the line of Noah and all that.
Right. And then just to cut things short, because there's a lot of random things that happen too. Seth is told to populate the world. They do. The flood is also a destruction. Depends who you ask. The main theme is, I think, Yaldabaoth is angry, and the Monad decides to save Noah, who had actually the true enlightenment, and his family. And also, the movie Noah is very Gnostic. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I'm not even tempted, but doesn't it have like rock creatures making the ark?
Yes. That's from one of the Gnostic books. Those are angels that are given human bodies as punishment for rebelling.
There you go. Sounds Gnostic to me. Okay. So we've got general Bible story now, except with this whole background fake narrative about there being gods above Yahweh, and Yahweh is like trying to deceive mankind into forgetting about this knowledge they've acquired.
Right. So now you're asking about something very important. How are you saved in the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's the point in all of this? So, a couple of things to set as background. For the Gnostics, there are three different stages, at least for the Valentinians. The material state, the animal mind, and then the spiritual mind. They have Greek terms for each. I'm not going to name them. Yahweh is supposed to be an animal, so he's not that impressive, but they're humans that can be have a spiritual mind. So if you do, when you attain gnosis, which is knowledge, the secret knowledge that there's a greater reality beyond just this physical world and its limitations and this evil bad god that's trying to troll us and just is mean to us, you're able to escape once you die and go to this higher dimension, back into the pleroma, the fullness where the eons and the monad inhabit. But if you don't, you're cursed to die. When you try to escape, your soul shoots out of the earth, but the planets, which are the archons, the planets are the beings themselves. Somehow they're gods. They're powerful. They stop your soul like a goalie stopping a soccer ball from going to the goal, and they just shoot you back into planet Earth.
Well,
so it's a cycle.
Sounds like rootin' tootin' good time. So we're like on a jail cell. Why doesn't the monad just come and like break us out? Jailbreak style, prison break. Send in somebody with the prison plan all tattooed all over them, and then we'll use that plan to get out.
Someone like Jesus?
Yeah, I don't think he had the tattoos, but that's where I was going.
Right. So there was a plan to rescue the humans, because the God in the Old Testament is evil, according to them. So thus we have to save the people from this depraved being. So the monad and the eons, they decide to create a representative from all their characteristics into the Jesus the Savior. So then this Jesus the Savior is sent to Earth to rescue Sophia, who's been, cast away as well from the realm of light into the physical realm, and also rescue other humans. Jesus was, according to the Gnostics, just a wise teacher, giving them knowledge on how to search your inner self and reach out into the beyond to have this true secret knowledge that will set you free from this physical, disgusting world, according to them.
And you can see, I think, how this could be attached to any Abrahamic religion, right? So it was first eating away at Judaism, and that's why Paul and John even talk about it, because it was already kind of a root thing that was happening in Judaism that was trying to latch onto Christianity. It really was attacking the Old Testament view of Yahweh. So, the Old Testament is true, so it's attacking Yahweh and Judaism and the truth by perverting it in this way, getting close to the truth, right? There is a Yahweh, and he did create people, and there is an enemy that came to tempt with the Adam and Eve with the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, but they twist it and say that Yahweh is actually bad, and that the apple is actually good, and that life is bad, and dying is good, and that Jesus, then they can just add on whoever, right? They can add on Mani, they can add on Muslim, Muhammad beliefs, they can add on Jesus and just be like, oh, extra spiritual teacher, right? Very New Agey, very reminiscent of New Age today.
Yes, and also to that tag along that you said, from anyone can fit that role. There are modern Gnostics that are mainly in the Middle East, in Iran, southern Iran area. The Mendeans, they throw in John the Baptist as being the main messenger from the Lord of Light, and then Jesus is just an imposter. So, many views, as you were saying. So you can just throw it in. You can just throw in whoever you want.
And your gentle summary of all the basic Gnostic belief right there really doesn't get a picture of the amount of diversity, the amount of crazed diversity that comes in this view. Just like the New Age, if you go back to our episodes on Spirit Science, the New Age, Spirit Science is a channel out there, a crazy New Age channel, but it does a good job of synthesizing a bunch of crazed, contradictory New Age beliefs into one semi-consistent belief that at least doesn't contradict it in itself immediately, right? Same thing we just did for the Gnostic beliefs, because in reality, they contradict themselves. The Gospel of Thomas, one of the false Gospels, totally contradicts several points in the secret revelation of John, and vice versa. There's lots of different contradicting things, tons of contradicting opinions, like on huge points, not just on small minutia, on huge points about how the archons work, how aeons work, how salvation works, who Jesus was, the rest. It's vastly diversified.
Right. And some points, just to bring it to your attention, if you're interested, would be that Yahweh, Yaldabaoth, create bodies and then presented them to the eons so that they could get life, or the Yaldabaoth steal the souls and then trap them in bodies. Doesn't sound that, it sounds like a pretty big difference in worldview. So just that contrast in itself questions how reliable these testimonies are.
Well, and I think the thing that really kicks the stool out from underneath beliefs like this, beliefs like New Age and other ones like it, is that all of this quote unquote knowledge, and there's reams of it, right? There's lots of this quote unquote knowledge. What is it based on? Where does it come from? It seems to just come from the sky, right? It's not like this was handed down from generation to generation. It pops up in the middle of, the first, second, third centuries, and it doesn't come from a line of succession. It doesn't come from a historical event. It's like a third person narrator saying these things happen, right? These things happen. There are aeons, deal with it. But it doesn't have an element of where any of this came from.
Right. When the moment that they say that the prophets of the Old Testament are evil and they're just minions and pawns of Yaldabaoth, Yahweh, they're chopping off any possible foundations that they could have for their testimony. At least for Islam, they try to base their beliefs on previous testimony, right? Saying, look, we're just a continuation. We're just consistent with... They're not, but they're trying to say that they're consistent with the previous beliefs. Whereas these ones, you're right, where they get the idea that Jesus said the things that he's saying, the lessons of Jesus. They clearly just made it up. Because for Christianity, we base the certainty that the Gospels and the epistles in the New Testament are true because they're consistent and line up with the same message as it does in the Old Testament. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and the Gospels are spawned from a knowable event, right? Jesus and others walked the earth and did certain things, and the Old Testament, same thing, right? Isaiah was a prophet who was in a historical time. It was given revelation by God, like we know why he wrote the things he did in Isaiah and why it was carried down to where we are today. Whereas the Gospel of Thomas, for example, comes out of nowhere, right? And doesn't even tell you who's writing it or who would have written it. Why does its account of the birth of Jesus, which is one of the crazy ones I think we talked about when we talked about how many is Jesus and other weird versions of the Jesus story out there, but it is totally different than the four Gospels, and it just comes out of nowhere, right? Like, who wrote it? Where does it come from? It's not based in history. And then the rest of this aeon stuff, clearly there was no humans around to, like, know this stuff. I think principally the problem is that in reality, all of this quote-unquote knowledge comes from the meditation practices, because that's what's promoted by Gnostics, is meditation and self-discovery and reaching out to the aeons and other spiritual beings to try to learn knowledge so that you can eventually be saved and escape this world. And meditation, when opens you up, that kind of dangerous meditation opens you up to contact with demons, and they'll feed you, all sorts of trash that's contradictory that end up making up Gnosticism, as they do to today's New Age practitioners. And that information is actually coming out of the blue, right? You got it when you were meditating. So you don't have a good excuse for why this is true, except that you heard it when you were talking to spirit beings in your meditation, which doesn't sound very good. So you just omit that when you are presenting the quote-unquote truth on your YouTube channel or ancient fake gospel book, whatever.
Or aliens.
And I think it's worth saying, Sebastian, we alluded to History Channel at the beginning of this podcast, but History Channel has been a huge push on the whole Gnostic Gospels are the real truth thing for years now. I mean, less so now that they're just obsessed with Pawn Stars, but there was a good decade that History Channel abandoned most history and was just replaying over and over and over again, not just Ancient Aliens, which is, a topic in and of itself, like we talked about in the atheism one, but also tons of critiques of the Bible. So most of them having to do with Gnosticism, right? There's missing gospels that are missing, they're intentionally taken out of the Bible, and they hold the real truth. And the real truth is that, insert whatever their crazy theory is. Aliens did it, or Noah was a supreme being that was created in a genetic lab, and whatever. I mean, whatever crazy theory, Gnosticism included, was presented by History Channel. So as much as Gnosticism has been dead for 1,600 years, the devil always wants to make untruth have a comeback, right? So elements of it survive today, even like it was back in the 400s.
You should have mentioned, that Noah being on a mystery van traveling with a flaming sword.
I have a really funny Christian fiction book about Noah called Noah Primeval, and I haven't read all of it. I only read the first chapter, but it already plays out like some crazed Noah is this beefy, really buff man, and he's got Methuselah and the rest of his family in the back of this caravan, and they're riding around the Middle East fighting off demons. So demons are flying around like physical things, and he's got this huge bendy sword, like it unfurls to be an unimaginable length, and it slays demons left and right, and he's riding around in this caravan for dear life, killing demons along the way like some sort of mystery machine, Scooby-Doo-esque demon hunters. And he's eventually the one, after the tragic loss of Methuselah is bleeding out, he's the one that has to build the ark under constant attack from demons. I mean, what craziness. So imagine that kind of fan fiction, except you believe it's real. At least that's legitimate, fan fiction labeled as such.
Yes. There's something to be said that there are books that are actual fan fiction and they're not blasphemous, whereas these ones are explicitly trying to refute the biblical message. So,
okay, so right before we get into the application of, I think, the three most important points about Gnosticism and how they apply today and what we should be looking out for today, you had some fun fact things that I think are worth mentioning about weird Gnostic stories, like we can talk about the rape of Eve or some of the other random stuff you had. Do you want to talk about any of that, Sebastian?
Yes, just casually, because you mentioned it first. It says that the chief archon, meaning Yaldabaoth, saw the young woman who was standing by Adam. He realized that the light-filled epinua of light was within her. Yaldabaoth became completely ignorant. And then just casually here, Yaldabaoth raped Eve. She bore 2 sons. Elohim was the name of the first. Yahweh was the name of the second. Elohim had a bear's face. Unique. Yahweh has a cat's face. Also unique. One is righteous, one is not. Yahweh is righteous, Elohim is not. Yahweh would command fire and wind. Elohim would command water and earth. Okay, so that's one. So just out of the blue, Yaldabaoth just rapes her. And then, because, Adam just has to get even, he has intercourse with one of the eons prognosis, and then that's when Seth is born.
And there's just a weird, generally mixed view on women in particular in Gnosticism, which is odd. And I think it's a product of how Gnosticism where it was originated and how it's evolved over the years. Because I saw, me and you, Sebastian actually pointed out, there's a modern Gnostic site out on YouTube, because there's a channel for everything, I guess, with a bunch of creepy people. Oh my gosh. Not like Satanist creepy, more like guy who lives in a basement alone creepy. Anyways, they've got a Gnostic channel out there. And I saw them, they had this Rape of Eve seminar. And it said that women were sent as a gift to men from Sophia, so from the good goddess lady, and that they were supposed to help men in, the misery of this life, and that when God, Yaldabaoth, supposedly the true Yahweh, when he raped Eve, he also changed her memory and lied to her and said that she was made from Adam's rib, so that even though she was in truth above and better and godly versus little old Adam, she, the creation narrative was upended, and man was put above her, and that this has been, a great wrong, and that women are actually better than men. So there's that narrative, kind of like feministy, power to the people narrative. But then, Sebastian, you were talking about a quote from
the Gospel of Thomas.
The Gospel of Thomas that has an interesting thing to say about women's salvation.
Yeah. So just for background, for the Gospel of Thomas, it's just a collection of sayings of Jesus. There's the infancy Gospel of Thomas, which is very different, but the Gospel of Thomas is just a collection of sayings. So, things that it sounds a lot like something that Jesus could potentially have said. Some are a little bit odd, like Jesus said, "He who is near me is near the fire, and he who is far from me is far from the kingdom." Okay, that sounds, something that Jesus could have said. There's some insertions from the Bible. There's over 100 quotes from Jesus just listed out here. So at the very end, as they're saying, "Blessed are the meek, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Okay, this is how the book ends. Verse 114. Simon Peter said to him, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven."
Feminism. Oh, you guys hitched your horse to the right one. I mean, I think the reason there's that whole feminist weird thing in that channel that we looked on YouTube is that Wiccans and witchcraft is like really big into female empowerment. So people that are already naturally disposed to that kind of thinking, they just want to bring it into Gnosticism now that they've jumped on the Gnosticism bandwagon. But as you can see, at the very least, there's some disputed, insane patriarchalness in the Gnostic movement that says that women can't even be saved unless they become a male, which is not the gospel, in case you're wondering.
Right. Well, thank you for throwing that in there at the very end, Michael. Yeah. So a lot of in Gnosticism, there's a lot of androgyny, meaning that the gods, the eons, and even like Yaldabaoth, they have female counterparts, so they can switch gender. They're gender fluid, basically.
Which, when we did our New Age episode and we did a bunch of research into that, it seems to be the case with these when people do drugs or whatever and they have encounters with spiritual beings, they are weirdly gender fluid. So it makes me think that demons do that kind of thing, right? They're really obsessed with gender fluidity, at least in how they present themselves to humans, which is odd. It's an odd thing. It's also the case in a lot of other religions that have spiritual elements. There's these like weird plays on what male and female are, especially in spiritual beings. Like I know Manichaeism, which is another big religion out there, the creation of humanity was like hermaphrodite people shooting their seed onto themselves and it like mixed with the earth and then it became people. And odd.
Yeah, on that note too, some Gnostics, I don't want to say, maybe it was the Basilidians, another group, that they said that Adam was supposed to be that, androgynous hermaphrodite, and then Yaldabaoth ruined the plan and actually separated them, male and female. So,
because consistency is not a virtue.
Right. But here's the best one. Here's the best, embarrassing
Gnostic story.
Gnostic Christmas pictures on Jesus. So this is not from the Apocalypse of Peter, which is actual fan fiction. It's funny, but it's fan fiction. This is the Gnostic Apocalypse of Peter. So, just some background. After the end of the book, it narrates on after the Last Supper when Jesus is about to be taken and crucified. So here is Peter and speaking with Jesus, like hanging on to dear Jesus, like not wanting to let go. And then suddenly, as he's like begging Jesus, like, no, like can't let you go. Peter sees someone standing nearby on a tree, under a tree, laughing his butt off, just cracking up. And then Peter's confused. He starts asking, who is this? Like, what's happening? He looks exactly like you, Jesus. So then Jesus answers, he whom you saw on the tree, glad and laughing, this is the living Jesus. But this one, into whose hands and feet they drive nails, is his fleshly part, which is the substitute being put to shame, the one who came into being in his likeness. But look at him and me. Basically what it's saying is that Jesus just grabbed some rando, made him look like him, because obviously Jesus was just a spirit, so he couldn't be crucified or killed, because physical bodies are disgusting according to Gnostics. So he wasn't even crucified.
Apparently, he found it really funny, when he was like telling Peter that, "Oh, I'm gonna die," and Peter says, "I'll die with you," and he says, "You'll deny me 3 times." Then he's being dragged off, and he healed the ear of the servant, and Peter is then eventually, weeping because of his denying of God. I guess it was all a joke, practical joke. Got him. Shouldn't have believed me, kiddo.
Peter's weeping, crying his heart out. Jesus being taken out, and there's some man standing there laughing at this whole scene. Oh my gosh! But from what you can see here, though, on a more serious note, you can see where in the Quran they would have taken the idea of Jesus never being crucified, and actually some other stranger was taken on his behalf. Mm-hmm. So most of that influence is actually from Gnostic sources. Same in the secret book of John. Indulge me. Let me go on Islam as well.
Do it.
There is the monad and the eons. They are called the Father, the Mother, and the Son. In the Mandeans, they call the Lord of Light, the Mother, Father. So what in Islam, if you remember from our series, the Muslims falsely claim that we worship the Trinity, which they say is the Father, the Mother, and the Son, Jesus. Clearly, from these Gnostic sources, there's a hint of the influence that it had on Islam.
Yeah, and it's not like a strange conspiracy theory that would have happened, because Gnostics were prevalent in the time of Muhammad and Islam being proliferated. So it's entirely possible that the striking similarities that Muhammad's stories of Jesus have with false Gnostic stories about Jesus are not a coincidence.
Right. Same also, from the infancy, all the stuff on the infancy of Jesus, that is not fan fiction. That's actually straight up heresy, Gnosticism, like Jesus making birds of clay, mm-hmm. and then they come alive, or him slaughtering a whole village because they were laughing at him.
Yeah, speaking
classic
from birth.
Jesus.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, classic Jesus.
Well, so that's that. If you ever want to know about Gnosticism, we just gave you a crash course on some of the general beliefs, some of the wackiness of it. Let's talk about the 3 main applications that I would say you can take away from examining Gnosticism. I guess a 4th bonus one would be, now you know about Gnosticism, so if you meet somebody who's a Gnostic or is espousing specifically Gnostic beliefs, you know where it comes from, straight lie from the devil. It's very similar to the New Age movement these days, proliferated by History Channel and other strange conspiracy theory style people, and it's total bunk. It's not historical. It's just straight from people's butts and from the enemy, and so you can really tear it apart just from a historical claim, like, oh, where are you getting this information? And immediately they'll just, earwax falls out of their ears, and I guess they run away. I'm not really sure where they go, but that's combating just straight Gnosticism. However, 3 main points that I think are the most applicable to our daily lives that come from examining Gnosticism are these. First of all, Gnosticism expressly points out that the Old Testament God is bad. Now, if you've been around the Christian circuit for a while, you know that is a very, very common belief amongst American evangelicals and worldwide people, Christians all over, is that the Old Testament God is a meanie, that God there's some versions that say, it was necessary that God be like that for that time, but now there's Jesus, so it's different. Or that I don't believe in the God of the Old Testament, or the Old Testament was all allegorical and isn't real anyways, and the New Testament is the only one that counts. That is a view held by not just the fringe, not even just mainline Methodist Protestants, but even those like pastor at North Point Church, huge ministry, Andy Stanley, believes that we should unhitch from the Old Testament. He is, I think, of the opinion that the Old Testament God was necessary for that time, but no longer is he ever going to act like that. Instead, he's going to act like love and kisses and high fives, because it's the New Testament now, which is a false view of God. God has, as Hebrews 13:8 says, Jesus Christ, if you're going to stick to Jesus, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And yesterday includes the Old Testament. So it's the same God. And when Jesus was appearing in the Old Testament, as we would say, it was the same Jesus that appears in the New Testament, the same character, the same judgments, the same triumphs and heart and love and justice. So if you look at the character of the Old Testament God and say, ew, you are adopting a Gnostic belief system that, it's not like you knew what Gnosticism is and you're adapting Gnosticism. It's really that this is a ploy from the enemy used on anyone it can get its hands on, including Gnostics, and so including Christians today. So that is a huge theme that I think we really need to dig in and combat. That the Old Testament God is bad. That is a falsehood. It's the same God, and that's why the Old Testament is at least as important as the New Testament. We should not neglect it.
Yes, and I really don't. My instinct is that people say that the guy in the Old Testament, the poor Lord in the Old Testament, is a meanie because they just haven't read the Old Testament. And, I used to be in that camp as well. In Catholicism is very prevalent, hence why, we talked about in the Catholic episode, throw back to that, about different intermediaries between God. That Jesus is the intermediary because the Father is too strict, and then it developed into Mary being the intercessor between us and Jesus because Jesus is also too strict.
Emanations, you might say, from,
right.
from the original God.
Right. But we have Psalm 23 in the Old Testament. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And it goes on as well.
Yeah.
But he's love, righteousness, and mercy. He's not some rando that just whips people because of his own amusement.
Where do we quote the whole, I'll take out your heart of stone and put in you a heart of flesh that you will believe in me and love me? That is from Ezekiel. That's the Old Testament, right? So it's the things that we love to quote because they sound nice. It's not like they're exclusively found in the New Testament.
Right. Most of the songs, maybe not nowadays. Maybe we criticize modern music a lot for some of the lyrics, but for the old English hymnals, they're based on Proverbs. They're based on Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
And where are those? In the Old Testament.
Yeah, and that's why it is just a lie straight from the enemy to say that the Old Testament God is bad, and you can see it exemplified in Gnosticism directly, by they just straight out say that the Old Testament God is evil intentionally, and that he still is. The second point that I want to make is that the Gnostics believed explicitly that the earthly, physical things are bad, and that is exemplified here in modern-day Christianity, often in asceticism, in the belief that earthly things are bad, that attaining wealth is evil, that eating is evil, and drinking is evil, and trying to better the world is evil, because ultimately you should have your mind exclusively on heavenly things. And there's that old saying that, so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. Well, there are Christians that are like that, quote unquote, but I'd say they're not really heavenly minded, because God created this earth, right? He's not the demiurge. He's not this Yaldabaoth who is trying to entrap you in earthly things. He created creation and called it good. And it still is, though corrupted by sin. When God returns, he's going to make all things new. He's not going to make all new things. He's not going to replace what's here. He's going to make the things that are now here purified, right? So if you're of the mindset that eating and drinking is bad and we should really be trying to avoid earthly things in general, I would strongly encourage you to examine yourself and see that God has given you all these good earthly things. Now, we know that, like the Apostle Paul says, that we should keep our minds on heavenly, on spiritual things, right? That is desiring the ultimate realities, right? The ultimate reality is that you should be trusting in God and growing with treasure in heaven as opposed to hoarding wealth on earth. But wealth here on earth isn't a bad thing, and that's something important to say. And eating and drinking here is not a bad thing. You know, Jesus ate and drank specifically, I think, to combat this kind of thinking that, oh, earthly things are bad and spiritual things are good. And the ultimate play out of that kind of mentality that earthly things are bad is retreating from the world. You're actually lacking to have love for your neighbor because you don't think that earthly things are important. For example, you're not working as hard as you can because you think that work is not important. But in this way, you're not loving your boss, or you're not loving the neighbors that you could be giving the produce of your work to, right? Whether you're a fireman, you're not working as hard as a fireman, or maybe you're just a businessman, but you're not giving as much money as you could be giving to your fellows. Or say you're even just a owner of a city or something like that. If you don't improve your city's land and the buildings and things like that, you are ignoring the creation mandate. Instead of being heavenly minded, you're actually being devilly minded, I would say.
Right. You're taking things to extremes, and God has a clear perspective on what our attitude should be. So, in Acts, Peter gets the vision of the different animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, is it like a giant sheet?
Mm-hmm. Coming from heaven?
Yeah. Right. And God tells eat, and then says, "Not call bad what the what the Lord has made, and it's good."
Mm-hmm.
Same also. I mean, this is not to take a shot at our Baptist brothers, but for when they're opposition to wine. But in First Timothy it says, stop drinking only water and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses. So. And also in the Old Testament, part of the celebration, if you could not make it in time for the festivals in Jerusalem, you were meant to stop at a nearby inn and buy some food and wine for your family to celebrate then. So,
and obviously Jesus provided wine at the wedding of Canaan. So that's yes, I would say that's a prime example of even well-intentioned Christians hating on fruits of the world inappropriately.
Right. Should we be moderate and balanced? Yes. But that doesn't mean go to one or the other extreme, as you were alluding to.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing, and I think this kind of meshes with that last point, is that Gnostics are all about escape. They're all about that this world is a prison. I just want to get to the next life. I just want to die once I have the knowledge so that I can get to heaven. Okay? Now, phrasing it like that, you definitely have heard this before if you've been around the Christian blog. I just want to die so that I can get to heaven. Now we know the Apostle Paul says, he's divided. On one hand, it'd be great to go to heaven and be with Jesus, right? Where all glory and happiness is, because you want to be in God's presence. But on the other hand, there's so much work to do here on earth. I think that should be our Christian perspective. If we know about heaven, we know it's great, right? We want to be with God, but there's also work to do here on earth. We shouldn't be looking to escape where God has put us, right? Paul gives it to God. He says, let it be God's decision, right? He's the one that is in control of everything. He knows what's best. It's the same. We should all have that position. We should not be at the position that, oh, I'm saved, so I'm just going to hunker down and wait for the end to come. I'm just trying to escape this dying, suffering world, or I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping to get to heaven. That is the wrong attitude. God has put you here for a time, and if you're just holding out to escape, you're not only giving into a lie from the devil. I think it being a core tenet of Gnosticism tells you from the devil, but you're also ignoring God's mandate to work and to serve and love your neighbors as yourself, and frankly to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength, because He's put you here.
Right, and the only justified reason to wish into that is from Isaiah, in which he saw the throne of God in Isaiah 6 and starts seeing how sinful he is. How woe to me, because I have seen my eyes have seen the living God, Yahweh Almighty. So that would be the only reason to really have that thought. But yes, in Paul, I believe it is in Philippians, he does say, I certainly would rejoice if I died and was not with Christ. But for your sake, as you were mentioning, for service to one another, for edifying the church, for building the kingdom, I think that it is just as fruitful to be here with you. So,
Yeah, that's where you get to live as Christ and to die as gain, right? And if your attitude is not to live as Christ and to die as gain, and instead it's to live is bad and to die as gain, well then you've missed Christ, right? You're actually denying God. So don't have that attitude. It's from the devil.
Right. So yes, any suicidal ideas or any thought of we should escape, yes, that is a spiritual attack. And the best way to counter that is through prayer. Immediately, I mean, at that moment, because that is a direct attack from the enemy.
Yeah, so that is what I wanted to say about Gnosticism. Again, I don't think you'll encounter explicit Gnostic beliefs or people that say they're Gnostic here today. I mean, possibly because the whole History Channel revival, but it's really small today. Like, Sebastian, if you looked at the demographics, the Mandeans, these ones in Iraq, they are 60,000, 100,000 possibly. And the YouTube channel we were alluding to was getting like 300 views a piece, which, doesn't constitute a large spiritual movement. So I highly doubt that you in your regular day will encounter an actual Gnostic, but what you should be looking out for is Gnostic style influences that aren't necessarily from Gnosticism per se, but they are from the same enemy who made Gnosticism, and that's what we should be looking out for.
Right. And now, next thing you know, Michael, my next evangelism encounter is going to be with Amandean, of all people.
No. You said, on a complete side note, you said that the Mandeans are one of these hereditary religions. Like, they say you can only be a Mandean if your father and mother were. Like Druze, if you've ever heard of them.
Yes. So it is, if you marry outside of the faith, you're no longer considered Amandean.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has got to be, they're in Iraq, so it's got to be like a compromise they've made because they're in a country that outlaws proselytization of other religions besides Islam, because otherwise it makes no sense. Same goes for the Jews.
Right.
Well, that is why we have found our cause and serve the Lord Jesus Christ, the true and living Lord Jesus Christ, who is good and the greatest of all. If you want to see the rest of our episodes, all right, I'll say that I've been the man behind the machine, Michael, and to my virtual front has been
Sebastian, the bookkeeper.
Trying to change up our ending and I messed it up. If you want to see the rest of our episodes, you can go to foundcause.podbean.com and look them all up and download them for your listening pleasure. You can also go to youtube.com and search Found Cause, or go to Facebook or Spotify or Amazon Echo or whatever you want, and there you can find our podcasts and leave us a like, leave us a review. It helps a ton for getting this podcast out there. Sebastian and I only briefly listen to our own podcasts and really enjoy doing them, so even if nobody likes them, we are going to keep doing them because it's great. Sebastian, you said you were even going to share one with your family, so I feel like it makes me all tingly inside, that's all.
Yes, I have to say we have a great balance between enjoying ourselves and presenting informative, useful information. So
we've got one researcher and one guy with a microphone, so that's all you need to do a podcast, I think. Until next time, thanks for listening. Until we do something completely different next week. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.